For this section, we're going to be looking at Chapter 5.5 in the textbook. And remember, we have been talking about the legislative branch, Congress. We've talked about the House, we've talked about the Senate. Well, today we're going to look at the legislative process. Now, remember, the word legislative means lawmaking. So we're going to be looking at the process of how a bill becomes a law. One of the things you need to understand as you think about it is that it's a much more complicated process than what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the basic structure of how a bill becomes a law, but there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes on that it's not part of the formal structure, but it is what has to happen. They have to make deals with other people and convince people to vote for their bill, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on. Now, as we go through this, remember anything that you see in red on the screen, that's what you need to put into your notes. Make sure you submit your notes after it's over for a grade, and make sure you do any work for Chapter 5.5 that is put into the Google Classroom. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me and pause the video if you need to. All right, let's go ahead and begin looking at our first question. Number one, how are bills introduced in Congress? Well, you'll either have a member of the House or a senator who will submit the required paperwork. So what they'll do is they'll come up with the bill that they want to propose, and they will have it, their staff will put it into legal form. I don't know exactly what that looks like all the time. I've seen some bills, but they'll put it in a form that will be fitting with legal terms, and the member of the House or the Senate will then submit that to the clerk of the House or the Senate. Once the bill is submitted, then in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House will then assign that bill to at least one committee for work. They may assign it to more than one, and they usually send it to a committee that deals with that particular topic. So if it is related to tax issues, they'll send it to the House Ways and Means Committee. In the Senate, it's the majority leader that determines which committee or committees it will be sent to. Once it gets to committee, then it will be worked on, and we'll look more about that in just a minute. So that is how a bill is introduced in Congress. Now, sometimes a bill can be just pertaining to one topic, or sometimes it can be pertaining to multiple topics. Sometimes you will see put into a bill a thing called a rider, R-I-D-E-R. And what is a rider? A rider is a provision that's attached to a bill that bears little relationship to the bill's main topic. They don't do that as much as they used to because they've kind of made the rules a little stricter and restricted the allowance of that, but it still does happen from time to time. And usually a rider is a bill that could not pass by itself. And so they will attach it to a bill that they know is going to pass. So that way they can get that bill passed through Congress. So for instance, they know that military spending bills are probably going to pass because no congressperson or very few want to be seen as weak on the military or abandoning the military. So that's a bill that will usually pass. So they may attach a rider to the defense authorization bill. And that way they can get this bill passed that they knew probably wouldn't pass on its own. And so that's what a rider is. And like I say, they don't do that nearly as often as they used to just because of restrictions and rules, but it still does happen, and sometimes causes a little controversy. How is a joint resolution different from a concurrent resolution? Now remember, you have a bill, which once the bill passes both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House, then it will then go to the president to be signed or vetoed. But you also have things called joint resolutions and concurrent resolutions. Now, a joint resolution is a resolution passed by both the House and the Senate that is then signed by the president. Once the president signs it, it becomes a law. And they call it something different because these are bills that are out of the ordinary kind of thing. So, for instance, after 9/11, when we were going to go to use military force against Iraq at the end of 2002, the Congress passed a joint resolution authorizing President Bush or whoever would become president later to use whatever military force he needed to accomplish the objectives we had, and it also provided the funding for it. So that was a joint resolution because that's a special out of the ordinary circumstance that Congress did, so that's why they call it a joint resolution. Now, a concurrent resolution is one that they both vote on, House and the Senate both votes on it, but it's mainly to express an opinion. The president does not sign it, and it never becomes any kind of law. Okay, so it's basically House and Senate stating an opinion. So if the House and the Senate both decided they wanted to state an opinion condemning someone for something they've done, they could pass a concurrent resolution. It would not be signed by the president, and it would not become law. It would just be a statement. Now, also, this is not in your notes, but you also need to realize that each House of Congress, both the House and the Senate, can pass their own resolutions stating their opinions by themselves, and those, of course, do not become law. All right, and the next question, letter C, what happens to most bills that are submitted to Congress? They go to committee to die. So what does that mean? That means that when the committee receives the bill, they can then either act on that bill by submitting it to a subcommittee for study and review and maybe revision, or they can not put it on the calendar at all and just let it die there. Most bills go to the committee to die. They're never considered, they're never talked about, they're never looked at. They're just there, kind of on the desk, but never really dealt with. 96% of most bills that are proposed on average congressional year, 96% of those bills never see the light of day because there are so many and they have so much to do, and that's part of the reason, but there are other reasons as well. So most will just go and they'll just languish in the committee and never see the light of day. They'll never be discussed or debated. All right. Now, what happens to a bill in a committee? That's assuming the bill does not just go there and die. If the bill is dealt with, when it's referred to the committee, then it will be referred to a subcommittee. Now, you have the committees are pretty large, and then the subcommittees are smaller things that deal with particular aspects of that topic. So like on the House Ways and Means Committee, which deals with budget and taxation and stuff, they may have a subcommittee specifically on income tax or something like that. So they will refer the bill to the subcommittee. The subcommittee will study it. They will have hearings about it. They may change it or revise it or amend it. And then they might approve it. If they approve it, it is then reported back to the full committee, and the committee will then have further hearings and further revisions possibly. This whole process is called the markup. Okay, so when we're talking about marking up a bill, that means that the committee is working on it, they're having hearings, they may be revising it, something along those lines, but they're getting it prepared to go to the floor for a debate. Once the markup process is complete and they approve it, if they vote yes, if a majority of the committee members vote yes, it then goes to the Rules Committee in the House. Now in the Senate, they don't have the Rules Committee, so it's a little different, but in the House, it'll go to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee will then, they don't change the bill at all, but they will discuss how much time they're going to allow for debate. They will discuss if they're going to allow amendments or not, and if they do allow amendments, they may limit the number of amendments that are allowed. They may limit what parts of the bill are open to amendments. And so that's something that the House Committee can do. Now, once the Rules Committee is done, it's referred to the full House, and they will have to vote on the rule first, and then they can begin discussion on the bill. Now, in the Senate, it's different. Once it's approved in the committee, then it goes to the floor for debate. Now, the majority leader of the Senate will have to put it on the calendar, obviously, but that will happen. So it goes to the floor for debate. In the Senate, it just goes straight to the floor, okay? And now they do things a little differently in the Senate than they do in the House. In the Senate, you don't have the Rules Committee because you don't need them, because debate is unlimited until you vote a certain percentage of the Senate to stop the debate. And they don't really have normally rules against amendments either. So that's just different. The Senate is meant to be more deliberative and more open like that. Of course, it's smaller. It's about a little less than 1/4 the size of the House. What is a discharge position? Let's say a bill goes to the committee and the committee just doesn't do anything about it. A majority of the members of the House can sign a petition. Should they sign that petition, and that would be 218, that's the majority, that would then force the bill out of committee. That would force the committee to refer it to the full House for discussion and debate and consideration. Okay, that doesn't happen often because usually if you're going to get a majority of people to sign a petition, then the majority would be in control of the House anyway, and that would be referred out of the committee already. So it doesn't happen often, but it can. What does the House Rules Committee do? And we've already kind of discussed this, but let's just put it on the paper. It sets the rules for debate on the bill, like time limits, amendments, that kind of thing. Okay. Number 3, what happens to a bill on the floor of the House and the Senate? They debate the bill. They might amend the bill depending on in the House whether or not amendments are allowed, or whether any amendments pass if they are allowed. And then they will vote on the bill. Once they vote on it, if they vote yes, then it will go to the other house for consideration. And then once both the House and the Senate pass a version of the bill, then they'll have what's called a conference committee, where you have some senators and some representatives meet together. They'll work out the differences, and then it goes back to both houses to be finally voted on. Once it's voted on there, then it can go to the president. But the bill has to be identical from both the House and the Senate for the president to vote on it. You can't have two different bills. That wouldn't work. Okay? So what is the committee of the whole? Now, in the Constitution, it says that for the House of Representatives to conduct business, they have to have a quorum. A quorum means a certain percentage of their people present. In the House, that would be half the members. So they would have to have at least 218 representatives on the floor to conduct business. Well, that doesn't happen very often, because sometimes they're out of town for work in their district. Sometimes they're in committee meetings, or they have other things going on. So it's really challenging to get 218 members on the floor of the House for work, because they just have so much else to do. And so what they'll do is they will then form themselves into a committee of the whole. Okay? And the quorum number for that is 100. So as long as you have at least 100 representatives on the floor, you can form the committee of the whole. And basically, it's like there's one large committee made up of all 435 members of the House, and the majority leader, the Speaker of the House, will appoint somebody from the majority party to be the committee chair. And it's a temporary committee, but that way they can work on the bill and do what they need to do. And then when the committee of the whole finishes their work, then the whole House will convene when they have 218 people, and they will vote on the bill. Okay? So that's the committee of the whole. It's just a way so they work on the bills and get around the constitutional requirement of 218 for their quorum. Okay, quorum is a word you need to know. It means you have to have a certain percentage of people to conduct the meeting. Like in the school board, there's 7 members of the school board. Legally, a quorum is 4. So if they don't have 4 members show up to the board meeting, they can't conduct business. What are the differences between the House and Senate when it comes to a bill in the floor? Now remember, in the House, it goes through the Rules Committee first. The Senate has no Rules Committee. Debate in the Senate will continue until cloture is invoked. Cloture is the vote to end debate. It takes a 3/5 majority. It's not a simple majority, it's a super majority. It takes 3/5. So 60 out of 100 senators have to vote to end debate. Once that happens, then they can continue on with it and vote yes or no on the bill. The Senate usually does not limit amendments. There may be times when they do, but that does not happen often. But those are the main differences between the House and the Senate with the bill on the floor. What is a conference committee? Remember when I said that if you have 2 different versions of the same bill passed in the House and the Senate, they're going to have to work out the differences because it has to be the same. So they will form a committee with members from the House and members from the Senate, who will then work out the differences and form a common bill. Once that's done, then that new version of the bill goes back to the House and the Senate. They cannot amend it or change it. They can just vote yes or no, A or nay. Aye or nay is what they say. So they can do that. So that's what a conference committee is. Now, what actions can a president take on a bill? Well, they can sign the bill into law. That's the simple one that everybody knows about. They cannot sign the bill. Now, if Congress is still in session, and the bill will then become law after 10 days. The reason they would do that is because they don't want to necessarily be associated with that bill for some reason, political reason usually, but they don't want to veto it either. And so they won't sign it. So after 10 days, it'll just automatically become a law. Now, if Congress ends their session after that bill is passed and the president doesn't sign it within 10 days, it does not become law. And this is called a pocket veto. And again, the president would do that for political reasons. So if they don't want to openly veto it for political reasons, but they don't want it to become law either, and they know Congress is going to be out of session, they'll just let it expire, basically. The president can also veto the bill, which, they can do that. And once the bill is vetoed, the Congress can then vote to try to override the veto by a 2/3 majority in both houses. Some presidents veto a lot of bills. Some presidents veto very few. And there have been some presidents who have never vetoed any bills at all. So that just depends on how the person who's in charge of Congress. Usually if you have a like a Democrat in the Senate, in the White House, and the Congress controlled by Republicans, they'll veto a lot, or vice versa. It just depends. Okay. All right, so that's all we have for today. Remember to submit this for a grade when you finish, and make sure you do the little quiz that is in Google Classroom that goes with this lesson. If you have any questions, let me know.